Okay, so you want to own a ski resort, a mountain, some lifts, and thousands of people paying you for the privilege of sliding down it. Here's the problem. You probably don't own the mountain. It's very likely public land, and you're operating on a government permit. Your entire year's revenue has to be earned in about 100 days. And every one of those days depends on something you cannot buy, cannot manufacture reliably, and cannot control at all. So the modern ski resort solved this in a way that has almost nothing to do with skiing. It got people to pay for the snow months before anyone knew whether it would fall. And it built a small city at the bottom of the hill, where the real money has been waiting all along. Let's start with the strangest thing about this business, which is what you actually own. Picture a famous ski resort. In your head, the resort is the mountain. The runs, the trees, the summit, the terrain, that's the product. That's what the brochure shows you. And in a great many cases, none of it belongs to the resort. In numerous countries, the mountain terrain a resort operates on is public land, held by the state or the federal government, and the resort runs on it under a permit or a lease. They pay a fee, often calculated as a percentage of the revenue they generate up there, and they operate under conditions the government sets. What gets built, what gets cut, what gets approved. So look carefully at the structure. The resort owns the lifts. It owns the buildings. It owns the base area at the bottom. And it rents the mountain. Sit with that because it flips the mental model entirely. You are not a landowner with a business on your land. You are an operator with a very expensive machine sitting on somebody else's ground. And the thing customers actually come for, the mountain itself, is the part you do not own. Your permission to be there is renewable, negotiable, and conditional. All right, so what do you actually pay for? You pay for the machine, and the machine is brutally expensive. Start with the lifts. A modern high-speed chairlift, the kind that whisks people up a mountain quickly and comfortably, is a piece of industrial engineering that costs millions of dollars. Not thousands, millions each. And a real resort doesn't have one lift. It has many, and every one of them has to be inspected, maintained, and eventually replaced, because a lift that fails is not an inconvenience, it's a catastrophe. Then the grooming fleet. Those enormous tracked machines that go out every night in the dark, in the cold, to comb the snow back into the smooth corduroy that people expect to find in the morning. They cost a fortune, they burn a great deal of fuel, and they run all night, every night, all season, whether the resort had a busy day or an empty one. And then the big one, snowmaking. A modern snowmaking system is essentially a small industrial water utility bolted to a mountain. You need a water source and permission to draw from it. You need a reservoir. You need pumps powerful enough to push water uphill, sometimes thousands of feet uphill. You need pipes buried across the terrain, compressors, and hundreds of guns. And when you run it, it consumes enormous quantities of water and enormous quantities of electricity at the same time all night. Add it all up, and the capital requirements of a serious ski resort are staggering, and they never really stop because the equipment ages and the customer expectations only go up. And there's a category of cost that outsiders almost never count, which is that you are running every single day a small emergency service on a mountain. Ski patrol is not decoration. You have people whose entire job is to find injured skiers in the cold, stabilize them, and bring them down. You are managing avalanche risk, which in some terrain means actively triggering slides with explosives before the public arrives at dawn in the dark. You are marking hazards, closing terrain, running a clinic at the base. And behind all of that sits the liability. You have invited tens of thousands of members of the public to travel at speed, on ice, down a mountain, in close proximity to trees, rocks, other people, and heavy machinery. People get hurt doing this. Some of them get hurt badly. Your insurance reflects that reality, and so does your legal exposure. And both of them are permanent line items that have nothing to do with how much snow fell, which is also why so many resorts now work extremely hard to exist in the summer. Mountain biking on the lifts, hiking, alpine coasters and zip lines, weddings, conferences, concerts. None of it will ever replace a good winter. But every dollar earned in July is a dollar earned on infrastructure you were paying for anyway. And in a business this seasonal, that is not a side project. It is a survival strategy. Now we get to the problem that governs everything, and it is one of the harshest constraints in this entire series. You have about 100 days. That's it. That's the year. Depending on the mountain and the latitude and the altitude, somewhere between late autumn and early spring, you have roughly 100 operating days in which you must earn essentially all of your revenue. And within that window, an enormous share of your money arrives in a handful of peak periods: the holidays, the school breaks, the good weather weekends. Meanwhile, your costs do not observe the calendar. The lifts still need inspection and maintenance in July. The mortgage doesn't take the summer off. The insurance is annual. The key staff are year-round. The permit fee is due. You are running a business with 12 months of expenses and roughly 3 months of income. And here's the part that makes it genuinely frightening. Whether those 100 days actually happen is not up to you. If the snow doesn't come, or if it comes late, or if it rains in February, your season shrinks. And a shrunken season doesn't reduce your costs. Your costs were already spent in the summer, on the lifts, and the grooming, and the snowmaking infrastructure, in anticipation of a winter that then failed to arrive. So, the industry's answer to this was snowmaking. If nature won't reliably deliver, make it yourself. Except snowmaking has a cruel limitation, and it's important to understand exactly what it is. Snow guns cannot make snow at any temperature. They need it to be cold. Below a certain threshold, they work beautifully. Above it, they don't work at all, no matter how much water and electricity you throw at them. Read that again, and notice what it means. The tool that protects you from a warm winter stops working precisely when the winter is warm. It is a defense that fails in exactly the scenario it exists to defend against. On a cold year with poor natural snowfall, snowmaking saves you. On a warm year, it cannot. And warm years are the ones that hurt. Hold that thought. We're coming back to it. And it's the trapdoor under this entire industry. So, a business with 100 days, enormous fixed costs, and revenue at the mercy of the weather. How on earth do you make that work? And here is the single most important commercial innovation in the modern history of this sport: the season pass. Here's what it does, and it's genuinely clever. In the spring, months before the season starts, the resort begins selling passes for next winter at a substantial discount to what a walk-up lift ticket would cost. And customers buy them in large numbers. In April, in May, in June, they hand over their money for a winter that is half a year away. Now think about what the resort has just achieved, because it's doing 3 separate things at once. The first is float. The resort has the cash months before it has to deliver anything at all. It can spend that money on summer maintenance, on new lifts, on marketing, on paying down debt, all funded by a winter that has not happened yet. That is an extraordinarily powerful position. And it's the same trick. A magazine subscription or an airline ticket pulls, except here, the product being pre-sold is snow. The second is that it transfers the weather risk from the resort to the customer. Read that again, because it is the whole game. If you have paid for your season pass in May, and the winter turns out to be terrible, who eats that loss? Not the resort. The resort has your money. You are the one holding a pass to a mountain with thin cover and a short season. The resort has converted its single greatest vulnerability, the weather, into somebody else's problem, and it did it by getting paid first. And the third is the one we have seen before, and it should feel familiar. The pass is priced on the assumption that you will not use it as much as you think you will. When we looked at the car wash, the entire subscription model rested on the fact that people buy unlimited access and then don't show up. This is the same machine on a mountain. A pass holder in April imagines a version of themselves who skis 20, 30, 40 days. And then life happens. Work happens. The drive is long. The weather is bad that weekend. The kids have something on. And a very large number of pass holders end up skiing a handful of days a season, having paid in full, in advance, for far more. The resort is not hoping for that. The resort is pricing for it. And once you understand that, the entire strategic shape of the modern ski industry makes sense. Because if passes are the product, then the way you win is to sell more passes, and the way you sell more passes is to make the pass more attractive than the other guy's pass. Which is why the multi-mountain megapass appeared, where one product gets you access to dozens of resorts across multiple continents, and why large companies started buying up mountains specifically to add them to their pass. They were not buying mountains. They were buying reasons for you to choose their subscription. And an independent single mountain, competing against a pass that includes 40 others for a similar price, is in a genuinely difficult spot. And this had a consequence that reshaped the entire sport. And it's worth stating plainly because it looks like a contradiction until you see the logic. The pass got cheap. Astonishingly cheap, relative to a walk-up lift ticket. A season pass can cost less than a handful of single-day tickets, which means the resort is deliberately selling its own product at a fraction of the advertised price. On the surface, that's madness. Why destroy your own pricing? Because they are not selling lift access. They are buying a customer. A pass holder is a person who is now committed to your mountain, who will drive to it repeatedly, who will eat in your restaurants, rent your equipment, book your hotel, put their kids in your ski school, and possibly, one day, buy a condominium at the bottom of your hill. The pass is not the product. The pass is the acquisition cost of everything else, paid by the customer instead of by you. But it created a genuinely awkward problem, and if you ski, you have felt it. When you sell an enormous number of cheap passes, an enormous number of people show up, and they tend to show up on exactly the same days, the good ones. So the lift lines get long, the parking fills before dawn, and the experience the pass holder was sold degrades under the weight of everyone else who was sold the same thing, which is a strange place for a business to end up. Its core product is now so cheap and so widely held that its main operational challenge is having too many customers on the days they most want to be there, and its main capital spending is on lifts that exist to move that crowd faster so it can sell more passes to move more people on the same 100 days. All right, so the pass stabilizes the revenue, but the pass itself and the lift ticket are surprisingly thin business. Let's stack the layers and see where the money actually lives. The first layer is lift access, passes, and tickets. And after you have paid for the lifts, the grooming, the snowmaking, the patrol, the electricity, and the staff, this layer is often doing little more than covering the cost of the mountain operation itself. It is the reason people come. It is not, on its own, the reason anyone gets rich. The second layer is ski school and rentals, and here the margins improve dramatically. Lessons are sold at high rates, and the equipment rental operation is a classic capital business, where you buy a fleet of skis and boots once and rent them out hundreds of times. But ski school is doing something more valuable than its margin, and the best operators know it. A ski school is a factory for manufacturing future customers. A person who takes a lesson and enjoys it becomes a person who buys equipment, who books trips, who eventually buys a pass, and who brings their children. The lesson isn't just a product. It's the top of a funnel that feeds every other part of the business for decades. The third layer is food and drink, and this is where the captivity begins. Think about where a mountain restaurant sits. Halfway up a mountain, in the cold, surrounded by people who have been physically exerting themselves for 3 hours, who are hungry, who are cold, and who have precisely zero alternatives because the nearest other option is a chairlift ride and a drive away. There is no competitor across the street. There is no across the street. There is only the mountain, and you own everything on it. That is why a burger and a beer on a mountain cost what they cost. Not because the burger is special. Because the customer is trapped, cheerfully, in a beautiful place, with no other options and a strong desire to sit down. And then there is the fourth category, which is not a category at all. It is the actual business, and everything above it has been a preamble, the base village, and the real estate. Look at what the mountain has done. It has attracted a large number of affluent people to a specific, physically constrained location repeatedly every winter. And those people need somewhere to sleep, somewhere to eat, somewhere to drink, somewhere to buy a jacket they forgot, and somewhere to park. So you build a village at the bottom of the hill. Hotels, condominiums, restaurants, bars, retail, parking. And every one of those things earns money at rates that have nothing to do with the thin margins of the chairlift. And then, the most valuable thing of all, you sell the property. Because a condominium that you can ski directly to and from, the ski-in, ski-out unit, commands an enormous premium over an identical apartment, a 15-minute shuttle ride away. Same square footage, same fittings, same view, more or less. The difference in price is not paying for the building. It is paying for the proximity to the mountain, and the mountain is yours, which reveals what the resort actually is. The lift is not the business. The lift is the machine that makes the land at the bottom of the hill valuable. And the resort operator, having created that value, is standing there ready to sell you a piece of it, or to rent you a room in it, or to sell you dinner in it, forever. You are not selling skiing. You are selling proximity to skiing. And skiing is simply the thing that makes proximity worth paying for. And once you see that, a pattern in this industry that has confused people for decades suddenly makes sense. Why do resort operators so often behave like property developers, rather than like people who love the mountains? Why does a company buy a beloved local hill and immediately start talking about master-planned villages and residential parcels? Because the mountain is the amenity, and the amenity has already done its job the moment the lift starts turning. The operator can build, entitle, and sell a village at the base, capture an enormous premium on every unit because of the lifts above it, and book that money now. The skiing operation, meanwhile, will grind along at thin margins forever. One of those is a business. The other is a very expensive marketing department that happens to be beautiful. So the whole structure clicks into place. Rent a mountain from the government. Spend a fortune on lifts and snowmaking to make it skiable. Pre-sell access to it before the snow falls, so that the customer carries the weather risk and you carry the cash. Use the resulting crowd of affluent, captive visitors to sell food, lessons, rentals, and hotel rooms at excellent margins. And then, underneath all of it, develop and sell the real estate that only has value because your lifts exist. It's an elegant machine. So what breaks it? And here we arrive at the trapdoor. And it is the only one in this entire series that is genuinely existential, physically measurable, and pointing in one direction: the temperature. Everything about this business, every single component, rests on it being cold enough. Not cold enough on average. Cold enough at your mountain, at your elevation, for enough days, reliably, year after year, for decades, because that is the timescale on which you are buying lifts and building villages. And the winters are warming, which produces a squeeze that operates on you from three sides at once. First, the natural season shortens at both ends. It starts later, it ends earlier, and the middle gets less reliable. Fewer skiable days directly means fewer visits and less revenue, in a business that already had only 100 days to work with. Second, you compensate with snowmaking, which means you run the guns more for longer on more of the mountain, which means your water consumption climbs and your electricity bill climbs in a year when your revenue is falling. Your costs and your income move in opposite directions at exactly the wrong moment. And third, remember the cruel limitation we set aside earlier. Snowmaking needs cold. So in the warmest years, the years that hurt you most, the machine you built to save yourself simply will not run. You will stand there with hundreds of snow guns, a full reservoir, and a bill for all of it, unable to make a single flake because it is 2 degrees too warm. That is the trapdoor. And notice that it does not fall evenly. It falls on altitude. High resorts, in cold, dry, elevated places, will be skiing for a very long time. Low elevation resorts, the small local hills, the ones many people learned on, are the ones that go first and quietly and permanently. And that unevenness is the cruelest part of it, because the small hills are where the sport actually comes from. They are where children take their first lesson, where a family can afford a Saturday, where the next generation of skiers is made. When those close, the sport does not simply lose a few mountains. It loses its entry point, and the effects of that arrive years later, at the big resorts, in the form of a generation that never learned. And there is a second pressure arriving at the same time. Because as the industry consolidates around the giant multi-mountain passes, the independent resort finds itself competing not with the mountain down the road, but with a corporate product that offers 40 mountains for the price of one. So the small operator is being squeezed by the climate and by the competition simultaneously, and the climate is squeezing hardest, precisely in the low-altitude places where the small operators tend to be. So let's answer the question we started with. What do you actually own when you own a ski resort? You own a captive city built on rented ground, funded by people who paid for snow that had not fallen yet. That's the honest structure. The mountain is borrowed. The revenue is pre-sold. The skiing is the loss leader. And the actual asset, the thing that makes you money, is the village at the bottom and the land under it, whose entire value comes from being near a mountain you do not own. So, should you buy one? Here's the honest split. The optimistic version goes like this. You own a high-altitude mountain with cold, reliable conditions and a long season in a region wealthy people want to be in. You sell an enormous number of passes every spring, so your revenue is banked before winter starts, and the weather risk sits with your customers. Your ski school manufactures new skiers, your mountain restaurants print money, and your base village is full of hotels, shops, and condominiums that you built and sold and still earn from. The lifts more or less break even, and you do not care because the lifts were never the point. They were the reason the land is worth what it's worth. And as the climate makes reliable snow scarcer, your high, cold mountain becomes more valuable, not less, because the competition is melting. The harder version looks like this. You own a lovely, beloved, low-elevation mountain. The seasons get shorter. You spend more on snowmaking every year to hold the line, and then comes a winter that is simply too warm for the guns to fire, and you cannot open the terrain at all. Your pass holders, who paid in the spring, are furious, and next spring they do not renew because there's a corporate pass that includes 40 mountains and one of them is guaranteed to have snow. Your fixed costs continue exactly as they always did. And the village you built at the bottom of the hill, the one that was going to be the real business, turns out to be worth precisely as much as the reliability of the snow above it. And notice what decides between those two futures. It is not how well you groom, or how good your lodge is, or how much you love the place. Because in the end, a ski resort doesn't sell skiing. It sells 100 cold days and a village built to catch what falls out of them. And nobody, at any price, can buy the cold.